I'm here with Pete Graner at the Ubuntu Developer Summit in Orlando, Florida. Pete, this cycle is the planning cycle for the 1204 release. And as the QA manager, what is your team working on this cycle?
Wow, that's a pretty big question. So our real focus right now is on getting testing to the point that it is a very valuable and reoccurring function that the team does. And this is all in the automated sense. So in the previous cycle, our prime focus was getting labs set up, getting equipment, finding what existing tests there were out in the community and within the engineering teams, consolidating those in our new lab, getting them up and running. And we were fairly successful given it took some amount of the cycle to get the lab up and running and to do all the legwork. And we were actually able to influence about the latter third of the cycle with very actionable testing. And by that, it means we were able to test, find defects, report on the defects, have the engineering teams fix the defects, all before the milestone went out. In this case, I think it was really about Alpha 3. It started kicking in last cycle. So this cycle is really about extending that, about deepening our test coverage in the areas we already have, broadening the test coverage to the areas we don't have, and providing very useful and, again, actionable information to the engineering teams so they know how to fix the defects that are found. We should be able to tell them what parts of their particular their areas of responsibility are weak in terms of quality. If there's a particular package or a subsystem or whatever that is having a higher than normal bug incident rate, we should be able to provide them this information so they know where to direct the community and their own limited resources on the canonical engineering teams.
Speaking of directing the community, how can the community get involved with this new QA process, with what you're doing? Where are the areas that it overlaps with what you're doing and what the community's doing?
You should ask John Bacon that question. But since he's not here, I'll answer. So what we did was we reorganized the QA team at the beginning of last cycle. And previously the QA team was really focused not so much on testing as on bug triage. While that's a valuable and important function, it's really more of an engineering function in terms of being on an engineering team than it is in the QA team per se. So organizationally, we moved them out of the QA team and moved those individuals into each engineering team. The new position is called the defect analyst, and they're to help the engineering teams understand what bugs are coming in and what areas they're having particular trouble with just by the defect reports themselves. We also split out of the community, or the QA team, the what was called calls for testing or manual testing. We pretty much split those out of the QA team so the QA team can focus on the automation aspect of it, and we put the community manual testing pieces inside the community team, which is John O'Bacon's team. And we felt because they have a better focus on community, and they had already set the precedent with cloud and some of the other technologies and having a community manager for that particular technology, we felt that since testing and especially around manual testing was something that was a very low barrier to entry for the community to help with Ubuntu, it should really be looked after as a first-class citizen on the community team. So Jono has that responsibility. He's currently looking for a person to fill that position, but once it's filled, the interaction between the two teams is that they're complementary. One doesn't do something the other one already does. We look to them to supplement the areas that we can't automate. So we're going to know very well into the cycle, probably about midway, about what our test coverage is going to look like by the end of the cycle. Then we can go to the community team and say, we're really lacking, for example, on Unity manual interactivity testing. That's something we can't automate right now very well. And this is a perfect opportunity for them to work with us to get test scripts written, or which would translate to very simple instructions that people can replicate across a variety of hardware and figure out a way to get those results back into our reporting mechanism so that all of this testing is actually helping the engineering teams. It's not a bunch of entries on a wiki page that we have to go and manually sift through, which takes hours and hours. And it's really hard to do real good gap analysis based on that. So that's just one example of what the team is there to do. Another one of their charters is to really consolidate the QA community in Ubuntu. Right now there's 4 or 5 separate QA efforts going on, all independent. A lot of them overlap. And it's about helping them come together as one Ubuntu QA team and focus the entire community on the efforts rather than having these fragmented bits going all over the place and often duplicating effort.
You mentioned that there's several QA efforts that are going on independent of each other. Has this been one of the most difficult obstacles to overcome, is consolidating those? Or has there been other obstacles you had to overcome today, and how did you overcome them?
Well, we really haven't attacked that problem with the separate teams. We're really leaving that to the community team to manage. On what I've been working on over the last cycle, probably the most challenging thing is, or has been, and it will continue to be, it's a changing culture. Rigorous and repeated testing generally is not the open source way. The open source way is release early and release often, and everybody will use your stuff, they'll report bugs to you, you'll fix your bugs, and you'll re-release, and the process keeps rolling. Having a very rigorous testing methodology is something a lot of open source projects just don't have. And with doing it, bringing it into Ubuntu has been a bit of a culture shift. While everybody agrees we want more testing, we need more testing, it's fine until you actually try to start doing testing. And it does change the way you work, it does change the way you react to certain situations. There's no sense in doing and spending a lot of money and effort and time on testing if you're not going to have those bugs looked at. If they're just going to sit there and nobody's going to do anything, why bother to test? So it's a culture shift, both within Canonical and within the community, to rally everybody around it. And it's been a multi-cycle effort. We started really, I think, back around Lucid timeframe, talking about what we were going to do for quality, how we were going to ramp it up. And it's culminating now with a bunch of acceptance criteria for various Canonical upstreams to help the Unity quality get better. It's culminating with automated testing that's going on, daily, every day, all the way through milestone testing. We're adding, test case management systems. We're adding all these things that previously weren't there to help both the Canonical engineering teams and the community really understand and know at a glance the quality of the product at any given time.
There's a lot of focus and attention been applied to the word quality, in the sense that this release is named Precise Pangolin, and that you're going to focus on that quality. And being the QA manager, what personally are you looking forward to really addressing this next cycle?
I think it's not just myself, I think it's the team. So we have a very small QA team, there's 5 people. And in our discussions about how could we best, with the small staff that we have and the resources that we have, how can we best benefit Ubuntu? And I think we all agreed that it's being able to give the leaders that have to make the decisions about what goes in, what goes out, what gets fixed, what doesn't get fixed, we're giving them the best and most accurate information about the state of the product that we can. And that's why one of our top priorities this cycle is getting a reporting dashboard up and running and in place, so anybody at a glance can see the state of the product, not just as a whole, but as its component and constituent parts. If you can think of it sort of like a pie chart, right? You would have each major piece a wedge in that chart, whether it's the kernel, or it's the desktop, or it's server, or cloud, or whatever. And they would be different colors. Green meaning everything's pretty good, generally good, to yellow being we have some issues, to red being we're pretty much broken at some point. And as you click through those, you drill down into the constituent parts and figure out, and you can see exactly down to what package level, what's broken and why it's broken and what its state is, who's working on it, where are they in the process of fixing it. So that's really what we want to try to get to. And I think it's a multi-cycle effort, but this is going to be the start of it. You'll probably see a lot of very rudimentary dashboards, being straight HTML that we're just going to have to kind of brute force with some scripts up until we can get a full reporting infrastructure in place over the next probably 2 or 3 cycles. So it should be exciting.
So if the community wants to contribute to the QA effort, how do they get in touch, other than the community team, which you mentioned, how do they get in touch with the QA team?
They can reach out to myself. They can reach out really to, it depends upon what their major focus is. If they're really like server-oriented people, they can reach out to Robbie Williamson, and he can best help them figure out who to contact if it's not him. If it's just a general QA thing, they can reach out to myself, anyone on the QA team. We're all in #QA on IRC on Freenode, or it's Ubuntu, #Ubuntu QA. There's the Ubuntu QA mailing list. You can drop in and ask questions, and we'll answer there. But we're all out there. Just reach out and touch us.
Well, thank you so much for taking time to talk to me here at UDS for the 1204 cycle, and looking forward to seeing what you all do as a QA team.
Thanks.
And where you go from there.
Great, thanks.